2, 3. Well, it all started out when Yank was just a little kid. Well, it all started out when Yank was just a little kid. Well, the man down the road to trade a mandolin for his pig. Well, they played around Brownsville with blind man Sleepy John. Jug bands of Memphis with jabbing old Sleepy John. Well, he made his own records and he played with Sonny Boy One. Blow that harp, Sonny Boy. Thank you very much. We are the Naptown Jug Busters. We're a jug band here from Indianapolis, Indiana. And that song is a song I wrote a few years back called the New Yank Rachell Blues. That's part one of that song anyway. It's a long song because our friend Yank Rachell lived many, many years, lived a long time. I think he lived to be almost 90 years old. And that's why we're here today, is to commemorate our friend and to pay tribute to our buddy James Yank Rachell. He was a mandolin player around Indianapolis area here since about 1958 or 59 when he moved to town. And he was such a great guy that he had such an influence on everybody here on stage and everybody around town, and was our mentor, so to speak. We pay tribute to him now with this little set. And again, as the song said, it all started out way back in Brownsville, Tennessee, back around 1910. Yank was born, and a lot of you folks know, lots of folks in the South had a hard time financially back in those days to begin with, if you know what I'm saying. And then he was walking down the road one day. He was about 10 years old, and he heard a jangly sound up on the porch. Some guy was sitting up on the porch in the town that he lived in, and like a lot of kids, he heard a jangly sound, so he was real interested in hearing what it was, and he went up on the porch, and the guy, he asked the guy, what's that you got? And the guy said, it's a mandolin. It's a mandolin, or a little tater bug mandolin that a lot of folks played, back in the old days. And Yank was just fascinated by the thing. He wanted to do what he could to kind of get that thing and make those jangly sounds himself. So he asked the guy, if he wanted to sell it, and the guy said, yeah, I'll sell it. And Yank said, well, how much you want for it? And the guy said, $5. And boy, $5 in 1919 or whatever it was at the time, that was a lot of money, man. $5 was the same as a $100 bill today, if not more, And so Yank, he was just a kid. He was like 10 years old. He'd never seen $5 in his life. He didn't have $5, but he still wanted the mandolin. And his parents had gave him a pig to raise, and to have meat for their family in the wintertime. So he had this pig that his family gave him to raise so they could have meat in the winter months. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I don't have any money, but I've got this pig. We could take the pig for the mandolin. And that's the famous story that Yank used to tell, that the guy gave him the mandolin and took his pig. And then when he went home with the mandolin, he tried to hide the fact that the pig was missing. And his mom kept asking him for the pig, and where's the pig at, and so on and so forth. And so finally, Yank admitted that he had traded the pig for the mandolin. And his mother was, of course, obviously upset. Then we had...
She's hungry, too.
Since then, the guy took his mandolin, and he played it all the way through, and toured around the world with it, and became, one of the most innovative mandolin players, and one of the nicest guys, and had such an influence on us. We pay tribute to him today. And he did a lot of stuff around the area there. He got up to a point where Victor Records decided to record him and his buddy Sleepy John Estes. Sleepy John was another guy there from Brownsville who was a blues singer and guitarist, and he was blind, and he was half asleep because he had Hodgkin's disease, so he was sleepy all the time. So he was kind of a mess, if you know what I'm saying, but a great guy. People liked him, so he got a good career going as a musician, and him and Yank recorded for Victor Records way back in 1929. They recorded a song called Divin' Duck Blues, and that song went on to be a lot of different variations, and many people recorded it, including Johnny Winter and Taj Mahal, and a lot of people recorded the theme of Divin' Duck. And Yank and Sleepy John, now you got to think that in the 1920s, the recording industry, the record business was pretty young at the time. So if you're on Victor Records in 1929 and you're 19 years old, you got it going on. So they had this really cool song called Divin' Duck Blues.
One second, I just got to say one thing. When Yank traded the mandolin for his pig, his mama said to him, "Yank, well, this winter, when we're all eating ham, you're going to eat that mandolin, boy."
Well, needless to say. Anyway, when we're all eating ham, you're going to eat the mandolin. Here we go with the Divin' Duck Blues. 1, 2, 3. If the river was whiskey and I was a diving duck. If the river was whiskey, Lord, and I was a diving duck. Well, I dived to the bottom and I never would come up. Well, I went to the railroad and I looked straight into the sun. Well, I went to the railroad and I looked straight into the sun. Well, the train don't hurry, there's gonna be some walking done. Walk on now. Don't ever take a married woman as your best friend. Don't ever take a married woman as your best friend. Well, she take all your money and she spend it on the other men. Wait one day. And I ain't gonna give it away. Say it for my baby, well, I know she coming home someday. If a river was whiskey and I was a diving, well, I was a diving or a diving duck. If a river was whiskey and I was a diving duck. Well, I dived to the bottom and I never would come up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was called the Yank ending. If you notice that, we all try to end at the same time. Yank had a thing where he would do a particular ending on all of his songs, and that way he could jam with different people around town, and everybody knew how the song was supposed to sort of end. We'll go ahead and start from the 5 and show everybody the Yank ending. Are you ready with that? Starting from the 5. Yeah, it's supposed to work like that. Yank Rachell, Divin' Duck Blues. Well, as I said, Yank played around Brownsville, Tennessee, and around Memphis, Tennessee, and around West Memphis, Arkansas, and he played with a lot of different people, a whole bunch of folks. One of the main people that he was associated with through much of his life was the guitarist I mentioned earlier, Sleepy John Estes. So we're going to ask, if you don't mind me, taking a moment to introduce to you the gentleman to my left who is playing this beautiful Martin 12-string guitar, Mr. Dan Bent. Give Dan Bent a hand, everybody.
Thank you kindly.
Dan's going to do a version of Sleepy John's song, Leaving Trunk. What do you got for us, Dan?
Well, we got a little leaving trunk here in the key of G. Sweet mama, would you be my kid? She said, well, I might, but you know I gotta keep it hid. Then she looked at me and she began to smile. And she said, I might use you for my man for a while, but just don't let my husband catch you here. I said, just don't let my husband get you here. So I went upstairs and I packed my leaving trunk. Never did saw no whiskey, blues made me sloppy drunk. Never saw no whiskey, the blues made me sloppy drunk. Never did saw no whiskey, but the blues made me sloppy drunk. Al Stratyner on the harp. It's a slow consumption, and it's killing you by degrees. Yes, it's a slow consumption, and it's killing you by degrees. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sleepy John Estes again, around Brownsville, Tennessee, and in Memphis, Tennessee, and there was another guy around there. Plenty of people around, you know, the Memphis Jug Band and Memphis Mini and all the folks that had come up. Memphis was kind of like a clearinghouse for all the Mississippi Delta musicians that were coming up and making their way to Chicago or to St. Louis or to Indianapolis or whatever. So there was a lot of people to play around, and one of the guys that was Yank's sideman, who ended up being a front man on his own and doing a lot of different things of his own note, was a guy named Sonny Boy Williamson, Sonny Boy 1, John Lee Williamson. And I'd like to introduce to you to my immediate right, if you would give a big hand to harmonica virtuoso, Mr. Alan Stratyner, everybody. Alan Stratyner.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Alan's going to tell us a little bit about Sonny Boy Williamson 1.
Well, the Sonny Boy who Rich is talking about, who played with Yank, is considered in modern blues the most influential blues harmonicist who ever lived. He influenced such harmonica players as Big Walter, and then there was Little Walter, Snooky Pryor, people like that, Far City Joe. He turned the harmonica into a solo instrument, somewhat like a lead guitar. In the past, before World War II, the harmonica was basically a chordal instrument, an accompaniment instrument. But John Lee Williamson really changed that. And we're going to do a little tune by John Lee Williamson called Good Morning, Little Schoolgirl.
Ready?
I was going to start this out of C.
Ready?
Ready. with you. Well, tell your mama and your papa I'm a little schoolboy too. I'm gonna buy me an airplane. I'm gonna buy me an airplane. I'm gonna fly on over. I'm gonna fly on over your shanty town. Well, I ain't gonna set my airplane down till the little girl lets me come around. Play that thing now. One more time. Oh, yeah. That was fun, everybody. Good morning, little schoolgirl. Good morning, little schoolgirl. Can I come home with? Can I come home with you? Well, tell your mama and your papa I'm a little schoolboy too. Well, tell your mama and your papa, yeah, that I'm a little schoolboy too.
Schoolboy. Thank you all.
Sonny Boy Williamson won. That means there was more than one. We'll get to the other Sonny Boys later here in a minute. If you don't mind me introducing way down to my far right there is Mr. Al Stone, everybody, playing that bass. Mr. Al Stone. Yeah, you might have heard that name before. Thumping that bass on the low end, and we have Mr. Bill Bailey up here playing the percussionies. The percussionistas. And again, Dan being here on the left, my name is Rich Hines. Thanks to everybody for
Rich.
tuning in. We're also going to do another Memphis area song. As I said, there's lots of people around Memphis, Tennessee that was trying to make music and trying to make themselves big and famous. There was a guy named Gus Cannon. He had a band called the Cannon Jug Stompers. I mentioned, I think, Memphis Minnie earlier, and her husband, Kansas Joe McCoy. Both of them people were powerhouse musicians, just the most amazing musicians you'd ever want. Just those two people. And there was also, again, the Memphis Jug Band, which was probably one of the most popular jug bands around, and still is, I guess, probably the premier jug band all these years later. And back in the late 20s or 1930s, they recorded a song that has become a staple for every jug band that's ever, anybody that's ever held a jug since then knows the song Stealin'. And a lot of people, Jim Kweskin Jug Band, and I think Jerry Garcia and David Grisman did a version. The Grateful Dead ourselves had a version of it back in the 60s, and we're going to do our version of Stealin' right now. We're going to ask Dan to kick off the guitar part on that thing, and we'll do the old jug band standard Stealin'. Around me like a circle around the sun. I wanna love you, mama, like an easy rider done. You don't believe I love you, look at the shape I'm in. You don't believe I'm sinking, look at the hole I'm in. Stealing, stealing, pretty mama, go
twice my size. Well, she's a married woman. She comes to see me sometime. You don't believe my love. Look what a fool I've been. You don't believe I'm single. Look what a hole I'm in. And I'm stealing. Pretty mama, don't you tell on me. Steal on back to my same old years to me.
Put your arms around me like a circle around the sun. I wanna love you, mama, like everything right at the fun. You don't believe I love you. Look at the shape I'm in. You don't believe I'm sinking. Look at the hole I'm in. Stealing, stealing. Pretty mama, don't you spell on me. Well, I'm stealing back to my same old years to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks.
I'm stealing. Some more Yank Rachell Blues here.
1, 2, 3. Well, he moved up north. He's living in old Naptown. When he moved up north, he was living in old Naptown. Well, blues man's a family man. It's time for him to settle down. Then along came John and Hammy Nixon too. Then along came John and Hammy Nixon too. Well, they toured all over Europe playing good old country blues. Play some good country blues down the Stratyner. Part 2 of my song, The New Yank Rachell Blues. I call it The New Yank Rachell Blues because Yank had a song called the Yank Rachell Blues. So this one's The New Yank Rachell Blues. I wrote that song back in 1997, the day that Yank died. Somebody called me on the phone, and we'll get to that part later on. But again, Yank played around the Memphis area, around Brownsville. And then like many other folks, you know, it got into the 1930s, and the Depression was really hitting hard. And a lot of folks, you know, were trying to do whatever they do to make money and to have jobs, and so many people, all different types of people, migrated. They migrated out of the South, out of Mississippi, and out of Georgia and Kentucky and Tennessee, and they came north. As many people know, it was the great migration north into the cities, into Chicago, into Detroit mostly. There was a lot of automobile manufacturing in Detroit, of course, and many people came into Indianapolis. In that migration, some of these people that played around Memphis, some of them went on to be, you know, factory workers, and maybe some of them became famous, and some of them were not so famous at the time, but they became famous later on after they passed away. And so we mentioned Sonny Boy Williamson one. We're talking pre-war and post-war mainly is the phenomenon. Before World War II, there was a group of musicians, and then after World War II, there's a whole other phenomenon with American music. So they're distinguished by our participation in World War II, and the separation is by that landmark. And so Sonny Boy Williamson was one of the most popular harmonica players pre-war, but he migrated to Chicago and had a problem on the streets of Chicago surviving. So he became deceased in 1941, and he had such an influence at that point that so many other musicians emulated him and copied him, to the degree where another great musician down in Arkansas named himself Sonny Boy Williams, and we now refer to him as Sonny Boy 2. And we'll ask Alan Stratyner to tell you more about Sonny Boy 2.
Well, what happened with Sonny Boy 2 is he was doing a radio show down there in West Helena, Arkansas.
The King Biscuit Hour.
King Biscuit Hour, exactly. And there were a couple of guys, the Moore Brothers Grocery, and they wanted to sponsor the show. And they had heard, everybody had heard about this Sonny Boy 1, okay? Because he was selling a lot of records. They called them race records at the time. And he was selling a heck of a lot of records. He was very popular. Well, way down in Helena, Arkansas, they didn't know what Sonny Boy 1 looked like. So the Moore Brothers had an idea. They said to Alec Miller, who was the second harmonica player we're talking about.
Rice Miller,
yeah. He was known as Rice Miller. Why don't you call yourself Sonny Boy? They'll all think that you're the Sonny Boy that's playing.
Nobody knows what Sonny Boy looks like.
Recorded in Chicago. Yeah, they don't know what he looks like. So sure enough, Rice Miller started calling himself Sonny Boy, and became very popular. Now, I don't want to make it sound like he was just a crass imitation of the first Sonny Boy. The second Sonny Boy was a wonderful player in his own right, and a wonderful songwriter. And he used to play a big, low, percussive harmonica like this one I got in my hand. And he did this song called Bye Bye Bird, which I'd like to do in tribute to him. So here you go with Bye Bye Bird. Bye bye bird, bye bye bird, bird I'm gone, bird I'm gone. I am gone, baby, I am gone to see my girl. Thank you all. Bye bye bird.
Alan Stratyner, everybody.
Thank you much.
Sonny Boy Williamson 2. Excuse me. 2, 3. Well, when Taj caught the Katy, so do them TV stars. When the brothers caught the Katy on the way to being movie stars. Well, Yank kept on playing in the local bar. And then along came John and Hammond Nixon too. And then along came John and Hammond Nixon too. Well, they toured all over Europe playing good old country blues. Take one, Dan. The new Yank Rachell Blues, and again, we're paying tribute to our friend, everybody's friend around town. He knew so many people, Yank Rachell, and it was nice to everybody, as far as I knew. There was nobody in town that didn't like the guy. Everybody liked him. So we're paying tribute to him today, and telling his life story to some degree, through song and through word. We are telling you the story of our friend Yank Rachell today. Thanks for coming out to the Indiana State Fair. Yank moved up north with many people. Migrated north to the cities out of the South to try to find work, and Yank loved his family. That was a big thing about this guy. And I'm not saying none of the other blues men loved their families, or that Yank loved his family more, but he decided to stay in Indianapolis and work out of Indy and stay with his daughters, stay with his granddaughters, and stay with his folks, as opposed to traveling around. And I think that helped his legacy to some degree. At least was good for us, because he lived a longer life, frankly. A lot of blues men out there on the road. It's hard on the road. It's hard to survive. And back in the old days, like the cops would shake you down. You leave your gig at 3 o'clock in the morning. They know you were at the gig. They know you got some money because you just got paid for your gig. So they'd stop you, pull you over, bust your headlight out, and take all your money as a fine. So it was hard to be on the road, be a musician back in those days. But Yank managed to do that. He managed to raise a family at the same time. And then along in the 1960s came. In the late 1950s, there was a folk revival and what they call a blues revival, and a lot of young people out of New York City and Boston and California and Portland and all different types of places were playing rural American music. And a lot of bands started looking back at the past and started dragging out these old guys from the pre-war. And at some point or another, they started doing tours of Europe. The European population became at some point enamored with American culture and American music. They were nuts about American roots music. And so they started having all these people come over there and tour. Willie Dixon mostly organized what was called the American Folk Blues Festival tours. And a lot of the old musicians from the past, and a lot of Chicago musicians also went on those tours and toured Europe and and brought American folk and blues music to the widest audience ever, and really broadened the appeal to this roots music to people everywhere. And in that process, Yank and Sleepy John became friends again and started playing music again. And they started hanging out with rock stars, basically. A guy named Ry Cooder was crazy about John Estes. And they started hanging out in Chicago, and they got signed with Delmark Records. And they did all these different things like rock stars do, at some point or another. But still, Yank managed to stay at home and provide for his children and for his family and so on and so forth. And then sometime around 1979 or 80, there was a television show on that everybody knows called Saturday Night Live. And there were two guys on there, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. They did this bit called the Blues Brothers. And so it got to be a pretty popular bit, so they got a band, which was the Stax backing band. You know, everybody knows the story, Booker T and the MGs. And so they decided to make a movie out of this bit. Everybody knows this. Well, the first song in the movie was a song called She Caught the Katy. And it was a song that the rock star Taj Mahal and Yank Rachell wrote together when they were out at Taj's house in California one time when Yank was out touring the West Coast. And so Taj and Yank wrote this song called She Caught the Katy, and it became the opening song at the opening moment of the Blues Brothers movie. Now, back then, this was a really popular movie. It was a big blockbuster, you know, and everybody knows that. And at the beginning of the album for the soundtrack was the first song, Yank Rachell's tune, She Caught the Katy. So he got a lot more notoriety out of that than what he'd ever had before. And a lot of different people, gobs of people have recorded this tune, and there's various different versions of it. And we're going to ask Dan Bent right now to do the Jug Busters version of She Caught the Katy. What do you got, Dan?
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
She Caught to Katie by Taj Mahal and Mr. Yank Rachell. And again, we're tribute our friend Yank Rachell today. He played with a lot of different folks around town and around the world. And that was his tune, She Caught to Katie. Him and Taj Mahal wrote that. And we also wanted to dedicate this set to our old friend, Mr. Pat Webb, who passed away a couple years ago. He was a good friend of Yank's and a great folk singer and blues singer himself. We want to say hi to Pat Webb. We also want to dedicate this set to Mr. Mike Butler, another protege of Yank's, who started out doing the Yank tribute here at the fair for everybody. So we say appreciation to Pat Webb and to Mike Butler, and we're going to go ahead with our Yank tribute right now. Well, I remember Pat called me in and told me that Yank had died. Well, Pat Webb called me and told me Yank Rachell had died. Well, I hung up my phone and I hung down my head and I cried. And then I picked up my mandolin and I began to play. And then I picked up my mandolin and I began to play. Well, my very best version of Yank soul tapping. Well, I've been to New York, I've been to New Orleans, just to hear Yank Rachell play his mandolin. I'm tapping that thing,
Great God Almighty.
I'm tapping that thing.
I said, great God Almighty.
Every morning at 8, you hear me tapping that thing. Take it on home, boys. Everybody for coming out.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
It's our tribute to the James Yank Rachell, our buddy. Say hi to Bill Bailey up there. Yay, Bill! Woo! Al Stone on the bass. Alan Stratyner on the harmonica. Dan Ben on the 12-string guitar.
Thank you very much.
My name's Rich Hines. We're the Naptown Jug Busters. Thanks for listening to us. We're going to do this set again here in a little bit at 4 o'clock. So if you're able to come back and you want to hear the song again, if you want to hear the set over at 4 o'clock, come on by. Or if you see somebody out, tell them to come on over here if you're not able to make it yourself back here for another set at 4. Thanks again. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming out to the 156 Indiana State Fair. How about that?
Yeah.
Woo!
Hello.